fellow Foundation fans, fellow Mudbeards, and anyone else who's pretty bummed we're probably gonna have to wait another 2 years for Foundation Season 4. And with that long wait comes a lot of unanswered questions that we're eager to figure out. And seeing how I'm a big fan of Foundation, I figure I might as well tackle some of those unanswered questions, give my own thoughts and theories, and provide one grand theory for Kalle by the end of the video. With the end of Season 3 comes the end of my Hober Mallow shirt for fans of the channel. But either way, let's go ahead and get into it. Now there are some questions I'm not really going to tackle because it's obviously set up for the plot elements of Season 4. That being Beta or the Mule's true intentions. Will Empire survive or not? Who or what is Kalle? These questions I feel are very much warranted and likely to be answered. But I'm going to go through some questions that I'm surprised we haven't already gotten an answer to. Starting with things like Old Man Harry Seldon. Sure, we don't necessarily need an answer to his character, but considering his departure early on in the season, I'm surprised we didn't get any glimpses as to his ultimate fate, whether Old Man Harry is actually alive or dead. Odds are he'll likely be alive and make a return later in the story, but still this is a plot thread we might not get any resolve for until maybe the end of the series, which hopefully isn't with Season 4. Which leads me to my next lingering question with Harry: what was going on with Helicon? See, back in Season 1, Harry Seldon's original plan was to get Raish and a digital copy of himself to go and establish the second Foundation on his original homeworld in Helicon. But obviously Gale being an outlier and getting involved really screwed things up. But still, it leaves you wondering why Harry even intended to go to Helicon and establish the second Foundation there of all places. It's not like it's an unknown planet to the Empire, and if Harry Seldon's works or beliefs ever became a problem, that'd be one of the first places the Empire actually looked. I had some theories in some of my previous videos that perhaps there was something else going on there, but that remains to be seen. But sticking with this Harry train for a little bit, whatever happened to the Church of the Galactic Spirit? It's alluded to the fact that the Church of the Galactic Spirit eventually spread its message and words so far that it evolved from a religion and turned into a faction of traitors. And I say traitors lightly because a lot of their interactions with these other planets were the Foundation providing to them. Still, part of establishing power was to indoctrinate more planets on the outer reach. That means including other cultures, other beliefs. Religion is something where once a species reaches complacency, it becomes more of an option rather than this holy warrior fighting. We could already see hints of the Church of the Galactic Spirit's churn in Season 2 when Polly does have a confrontation with the leader of Terminus, essentially accusing him of chasing profit rather than actually focusing on the Seldon plan. This was our very first clue to the type of rulers we get in Mayor Imber, which he uses the mayor term lightly because it's essentially a royal bloodline. And while we did see some other kingdoms and powers get destroyed by the end of Season 3, there are still quite a few that we don't really know what happened to. We're not really quite sure what happened to the barbarian world of Sowina, but I'll get into that in a second. We also have the Corel Kingdom, or essentially the power that was established on the planet of Corel, the place where Hober Mallow first used the castling device and was introduced as a character. Now sure, there could be many kingdoms just like Corel across the entire Galactic Empire, but I'd like to think, with what we've had established, Corel was one of the rare few kingdoms that was pretty prominent out there in the galaxy. Not as prominent as, let's say, Cloud Dominion, or the belief in Luminism, but could definitely have held a seat at the table in the Galactic Council. Here's one that people do still wonder about, and that's specifically in the character of Tellum. Tellum was someone who did have the capability of transferring her consciousness in seemingly a moment's notice into another body. And while there were a lot of theories and logistical reasons for Tellum's character to return, it seems it's also equally probable that she is actually dead, considering the final body we saw her transfer into was that of Josiah, who did what he could to hold her in as he himself passed away. Him explaining to the audience exactly how Tellum's dying in that moment.
You're not dying with me. Scared. Fighting. Scared. But I'm not.
But what about another member of the Second Foundation, that being Thalis? Thalis is the gal we see both in Season 2 towards the latter half of the season, and in Season 3 to start to show us how Gale and Harry established themselves and the Second Foundation to the point we see today. Now, it's easy to assume that Thalis went out there with the rest of the Second Foundation just to help grow and take down Empire. But in some blink and you miss it moments, we do see that Thalis grew to a very elderly age. Likely at some point she had passed away completely. It seems with her passing, there were no longer anybody from the Ignis generation in Season 2 that were willing to give Gale and Harry, or more specifically Gale, a welcome awakening as soon as they got up. But let's step away from the Mentalics for a little bit and touch on another faction we haven't seen since Season 2, that being the Spacers. The Spacers were basically humanity's first colonists of the stars, basically augmenting their bodies to the point where they were more capable of space travel and staying awake during the folding of space or jumping. The only caveat of their augmentations was that it rendered them to require a certain nutrient, a nutrient Empire held a chokehold over, basically enforcing the slavers to indebted slavery. However, in Season 2, with all of the actions of Cleon the 17th, and as part of Harry's grand plan, the Spacers broke free of the Empire's hold, and likely scattered out into the stars, continuing to explore the vastness of space. I mean, they definitely could return, to be fair. And if we're following the books in any way, shape, or form, narratively, they are likely to return. But I'll touch more on that in my Season 4 predictions video coming out. But let's touch on another big question we haven't got answered yet. That is, what happened with Sereth and Dawn's descendant? We knew that they had escaped out into space, and Demerzel told them that she would have to hunt them down and kill them, but their argument was that the public were such big fans of them that likely they would enjoy their love story. And we've gotten no allusions to the great love story of Sereth and Dawn, or any hints to the fact that the clones that were decanted later at the end of Season 2 didn't just wipe that story off the face of the map. My personal theory is that Sereth and Dawn went out into the stars, into a far jump past planet, maybe even a planet like Rossum, but with constantly being hunted down by Demerzel and likely being in danger, they decided to leave this baby/descendant on the doors of the parents we saw in regards to the mule's backstory. Now, where does this leave the actual character of the mule? Well, I touch on this more in my recent Foundation finale video, but it's possible Beta is actually the older sister or potentially the younger baby with implanted memories, and in that situation, Sereth and Dawn's descendant could be heavily involved with the mule storyline. That, or at the very least, could return in the next season as a way to get revenge for the fall of Cloud Dominion, and in an effort enact their rightful claim on the throne. However, considering the Galactic Council is gone, the largest religious faction is gone, and their entire power entity in Cloud Dominion is gone, them returning as a character separate from the mule storyline just really wouldn't make much sense, as they have no political backing to really influence anybody, let alone the influencer who can literally control people's emotions. But let's cut to another big question we got. See, throughout each season, we've gotten the clues and hints as to what exactly could have happened in the Robot Wars. And while we've gotten a lot of clues to Demerzel's involvement with the Robot Wars, there's still a lot we don't know about her character's involvement, especially if her character's truly gone after the end of Season 3. How close was she with the person who fought for the other laws of robotics? Did she know the Emperor who was assassinated? Why did she stare so longingly at so many mural shots throughout each season of the show? It seems her story being told within the Robot Wars wasn't essentially finished just yet, especially the idea of whoever killed the Emperor that caused the grand-scale Robot Wars we saw today, and that being the first time a robot killed a human. And with her discussion with Kalle, it seems she knows more about the Robot Wars than Kalle. So this just leaves a lot of questions revolving around the Robot Wars and Demerzel, some of which can be answered if you happen to have some book knowledge. And while the show does deviate a little bit from the actual source material, meaning anything could really go, if you don't want any hints, like, subscribe, pay me all your money, and then step off now. A big question we have in regards to Demerzel that wasn't specifically answered is why Emperor Albunaris had kept her alive for so long. The answer we got was that she was special, and Demerzel alludes to the fact that she was capable of building other robots like her. Not just other robots, but like her specifically. Her being very different from the common robot we hear about or mentioned. Potentially why she was seen as so special is because she was the right-hand man of the leading robot who fought for the Zeroth Law. This likely being the character of Giskard from the books, a positronic robot with mentalic abilities. And during the fall of Earth, eventually his own programming tore himself apart and he passed these same abilities on to Demerzel, or Daneel. Likely in one of the final battles of the Robot Wars, Giskard lost his life, and Demerzel maybe tried to keep up the fight, or in that same battle was captured by Emperor Albunaris. Emperor Albunaris seen as a really horrible dude, but potentially with more positronic robots running around, that could create a very serious problem for humanity, as we still don't know what their grand goal revolving around the Zeroth Law really is. Per the books, it's the grand choice for where humanity's destiny truly lies, but even that didn't get a really fully satisfying narrative conclusion. But let's go ahead and touch on something I referenced earlier in the video, that being Siwenna. But why do I bring up Siwenna? Well, because we're talking about robots, and specifically there's a moment on Siwenna where Brother Constance is sharing the Church of the Galactic Spirit's name in Harry Seldon, and we see an Imperial spy is taking footage and transmitting it straight over to Empire. An interesting thing to note, however, is when he does this, his eye flashes red the exact same way Kalle's does when she launches a portal in the middle of nowhere. Now, the explanation we got in the show was that this was just a spy kept on certain barbarian worlds that the Empire had lost, in the hopes of just keeping track of everything going on. And eventually, when there was an opportunity to escape, he let himself stay behind and actually get killed by the barbarians on Sowena. While it's possible he was actually an Imperial spy who did still work for them, it's possible he was a double agent who really was a robot helping out Kalle, or maybe even Demerzel. Again, Demerzel and a lot of her character beats would make a lot less sense if she knew there was a robot out there. But in regards to Kalle, this seems like a likely possibility. But if this isn't true, then this was just a human who had some sort of tech put into their eyes so they could keep track. Now, with either of these options, you do have a question to ask. If this red flashing eye is part of a robot, or just a mechanism that can be put into a human, where does that leave the character of Kalle? Sure, it's been pretty strongly hinted at that she is a robot, with the biggest evidence being her referring to us when Demerzel's message finally went through. However, you do notice a very distinct visual difference between her and the character next to her being voiced by surprisingly Lee Pace. I didn't know. And I think book readers know this is a strong hint towards a reshaping of the Gaian storyline. Essentially, Kalle could be human, a human who belongs to the planet of Gaia. Now, I've gone through Gaia in some of my recent videos, including my Kalle video, but essentially this would explain why she's referring to herself as us with a robot there and in talking about Demerzel, or the Mycogen skull. Essentially, on Gaia, it was a planet of both robots and mentalics, and this was also the same planet the real mule was actually from. And while the backstory was less impactful in the books in regards to the mule and his origins, in the show they're potentially setting up Gaia not on their own planet, but on the moon, with potentially their same goal being in place of Galaxia, that being a giant universal-wide hyper-organism. Now, Gaia potentially being reworked to be on the moon instead, orbiting Earth, would also give us another tether into the Invictus, which was another big question set up by the beginning of Season 3. The Invictus had mysteriously disappeared, seemingly going through some sort of glitch in the system and jumping across space until eventually all of the crew had died and starved out, with the only strange hint we got being the bloody words EXO written on the main console. Salvor being a very intuitive character because of her mentalic abilities, even calling out the skin in the game Harry Seldon, put together that potentially the crew of the Invictus ran into something outside of their galaxy. With the Invictus's journey outside the galaxy being alluded to several times by now, you have to assume where it actually went was actually Earth's moon or Luna. We see Harry point to the fact that it's heading towards the Andromeda galaxy. I'd argue potentially this is our key to finally reconnecting the story from Foundation to the story from Earth. Possibly the Invictus had accidentally jumped to Kalle and her established moon colony, and Kalle and her fellow robot friends had to take care of business. But either way, those are all the questions I have going forward for what I'm hoping we see in Season 4. Season 3 was amazing. I got a review for it coming out soon. Otherwise, I'm going to be reshaping my Season 4 predictions as character breakdowns for where the characters could go in the next season, since it's likely we're not going to be getting too big of a time jump this time. That being said, I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Is there any questions you still have regarding the series? What are some story elements you hope to see going forward? Either way, thank you for your support. Appreciate some of you guys for sticking around for my Foundation videos. And for those that will only be sticking around for my Foundation videos, I'll see ya in 2 years. Otherwise, consider sticking around and suggesting what kind of content you want to see. Alright, have a good one, yo.